Pick a move in the ring. You can hit me with the words you fling.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Post-Fight Podcast. I am joined by Mr. Chris EB in the studio in Hong Kong, and we've got JHK over in Korea. As usual, we're going to be breaking down the UFC Fight Night Las Vegas card. Guys, let's just talk about that main event, Tyron Woodley against Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns absolutely dominating Tyron Woodley, much in the manner that Kamaru Usman did to take the title off him, didn't he?
Yeah, 100%. I think Tyron Woodley, one of the best ever athletes to compete in the welterweight division, probably the best champion over a period of time since George St. Pierre, the Hall of Famer as he will be soon. And that athleticism is gone. He looks slow. I thought Gilbert Burns could win this fight. I didn't think it would be the ridiculous scorecards we saw, the one-sided fight. Tyron Woodley looked glazed over, no ideas. All I saw was him just trying to land a big right and not really much variation to his game.
Why don't we take a look at the scorecards? John, you're not surprised, I imagine, by these scores. A couple of 10-8 rounds, it looks like, for Burns in that first round.
Yes, there's no surprise with that. Gilbert Burns came in with a flawless game plan of pressuring, really leaving off where Rory McDonald, where he kind of dominated Woodley in their fight, very similar to what he did, except for Burns was much more of a threat with the ground, and he even took Woodley down with a power double, I believe, in the second round. And I think that surprised a lot of people. But it was just Burns just mixing it up and having his striking arsenal on full display and showing that he is developing into one of the elite strikers, you know what I mean, in the welterweight division. He's not elite yet, but he's showing improvements every time around. And he baffled Woodley. Woodley looked complacent. Woodley did not have a plan B. Woodley didn't even try to wrestle, which was kind of interesting. I would think like your plan A would be to go in there and knock him out on counters, but if that's not working out, you'd go for you'd want to wrestle with Burns and take him down and just rain down shots from the top. I'm pretty sure Woodley is versed enough in jiu-jitsu to where he can stay out of submissions, but I guess he wasn't ready to play that game, and Burns just took over and put the performance of a lifetime on display for us to marvel. And shout out to Gilbert Burns. He did a great job, and following him in his welterweight journey has been a very, very big pleasure for me. And I'm ready for him to go in there and fight for the title, which is crazy to say because 2 years ago, he had just gotten knocked out by Dan Hooker at lightweight. And now look where he's at welterweight. It's just insane what can happen in a matter of 24 months.
Indeed, Gilbert Burns calling out teammate at Sanford MMA and welterweight champion Kamaru Usman. Let's have a little look at what he said. But Chris, do you think that fight is too soon? Does he deserve it? There's a bunch of contenders there who could really get a title shot. You're thinking Leon Edwards, Colby Covington has a case for a rematch.
Masvidal. The thing is, right now, that welterweight division is so stacked, and it's good to have another player in that party of fighters. I think Gilbert Burns probably needs one more, probably needs to build up the name. But then if Jorge wants the money fight, it's probably better to go for a Colby. And if you're Usman, who hasn't really got a big name outside of the hardcore MMA fans, Gilbert Burns could be a good fight. I just don't see that being the fight that Dana will make. Neither of them are huge stars. And Gilbert Burns is pretty much still relatively unknown to most people. Obviously, tonight you will make a massive splash around the world, but I think it's probably still one more fight away.
Let's see what he said. This is a post-fight interview with Daniel Cormier on the ESPN broadcast afterwards.
Corner, Kamaru Usman, but give me a shot. Dana White, Hunter, Sean Shelby, Kamaru, I want to fight for the title. A lot of respect, a lot of love for you, but I think I'm next. I'm right there. He beat the former champion, just beat the same way, or I don't know, maybe even better. I want to fight for the title, and I'm next. Like, if they want to make a fight on July, come on, injury free, just be the former champion, have no scratch, nothing. I can fight on July. Come on, I want to fight for the title.
Can fight in July.
Yeah,
no scratches. It's true. He didn't really look beat up.
But
oh, I starting again.
Hunter, Shelby.
Sorry, Gilbert, we have to cut you off there. Yeah. You want to see that July? Would it be too soon, Chris?
If it was possible in July, I'd love to see it. I think Gilbert the only argument that Gilbert does have to fight Usman is I think Usman won 4 rounds to 1. Gilbert won all 5 rounds, was probably more dominant. And I think looking back at the fight, it's that first 30, 40 seconds where he gets the takedown, he rains down on him, and he's got a cut above the elbow. And I think some part of Woodley as well gave up in that fight. I don't ever want to accuse any fighter of giving up, but I think maybe he's realized that athleticism and speed is not there anymore. I don't know, but you know, it's like seeing an old lion fight a young lion in the jungle. It makes you sad sometimes to watch it.
Yeah, John, I'll get your thoughts on Woodley in a moment. Let's just read what Dana White had to say about Woodley after the fight. This is the post-event press conference. And I think he was asked, do you think Tyron Woodley should retire? Dana White said he'll determine that. I mean, Tyron worked hard to take this fight. He got dominated tonight, and he'll drop in the rankings. We'll see how he does if he comes back. He's 38 years old. It's been huge gaps in his fight time. It's been almost 2 years since he fought. That's tougher to do as you get older, even if you're a physical freak as he is. Yeah, so he is 38 years old. Does he look a step slower now than even that last Usman fight when he was dominated again?
He looks the same. Woodley, he's 38. He's coming off back-to-back losses where he was dominated by both top contenders, and the previous fight was for the title. I don't think it's over for Woodley. Woodley is old for the division, but it's not over for him. He still has a lot of fights in him. And it all just depends on where he is mentally with his career. Is he ready to go take over Hollywood? Does he want to focus more on that? You know, there's a lot of things playing in his mind, I think, in his life. It's not just fighting. When you look at Burns is all about fighting. And you could tell right when the fight started, it was going to be Burns that, you know, from, the first 3 minutes when Burns hit that counter, when they exchanged, and then Woodley looked like he was rocked and he took them down, like Chris was saying. And after that, after he got elbowed a few times, it's just like, man, he's thinking about that world star hip hop money. I think that's running through his brain for the rest of the rounds. It's just almost like survival mode for him. But Woodley, even if he doesn't fight for the title again, he still has a lot of money fights, you know, fights that he could get paid, and he could just go out there and just let loose. Even though he loses, it doesn't really matter. He very much cemented his legacy in the welterweight division. The way he fought Wonder Boy, the way he knocked out Robbie Lawler, he's always going to be one of the best ever at 170. There's nothing that's going to change that. It's just, where does he want to go from here? Is he going to retire? I never say fighters should retire. That's their decision. But yeah, there's so many fights. There's Colby, there's Jorge, there's Chiesa, Dos Anjos. There's the Nate Diaz fight. There's so many fights that you could put Woodley. The UFC could use Woodley as a gatekeeper too. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, Donald Cerrone made a good living off being the gatekeeper, and there's that fight too. What about Donald Cerrone versus Tyron Woodley at welterweight? That's a good fight. That's a banger. Anybody would watch that. So many fights for Woodley. It's not over for him.
But don't you feel some of those fights, you mentioned the Colby Covington fight, there was so much history there, but now some of the shine's been taken off it. Some of the spark just won't be there, because Tyron Woodley really prides himself, doesn't he, on being the best. And he said, oh, that Usman fight, that was just a one-off. I had a bad night. It wasn't a one-off. He's had 2 bad nights now. And is he the same fighter? Are those fights against Colby Covington, against Nate Diaz, against George, against Leon Edwards, against Cowboy, are they going to be the same? Is there the same appeal, I'm saying, as there was before this?
Well, I think Tyron Woodley needs to have a Masvidal moment if he's going to do something. When Masvidal went on that Latino version of The Bachelor, and he just decided, I've got to stop doing all this other crazy stuff and just concentrate on fighting. Because if you do look at the best fighters, Masvidal, Usman, Gilbert Burns, I get the feeling that they are right now eating, living, drinking, thinking about fighting the whole time. And as John said earlier, he has got a bit of acting going on. He has got his hip-hop music, if you love it or hate it, going on. And, I think he's still coaching a bit of wrestling back in his old gym as well. And I think he really has to make a decision right now if he wants to just be a gatekeeper or if he wants to have another go and cement that legacy. I mean, fighting a Colby and a Masvidal, even though it's not fighting for a title, they're still high-level fights. Dropping down to maybe a Chiesa or a Cerrone or a Diaz, there is a drop in the caliber between them, I personally believe. And even he could go down the Jose Aldo route. and just say to Dana, okay, if I'm not going to get championship money, I'll be co-main because I'll just fight 3 rounds. And I mean, there's no need to fight 5 rounds if you're not getting belts.
John, I'll give you the last say on Tyron if you had anything to add there. Sorry.
Yeah. With Woodley, there's always the middleweight division too for him. You know, he's talked about it in the past how he wants to, test himself against the middleweights up there. There's a lot of fights for him at middleweight. He don't have to cut weight. He could go in there as the best version of himself. You never know. Maybe he might get rejuvenated. Maybe he learned something today about himself and said, "Hey, maybe I'm cutting too much weight. Maybe I should go back. Maybe I should go up to the weight that I'm supposed to be at middleweight and see what happens." Because like we have seen with other welterweights that are big, they move up to middleweight and they're pretty successful. Robert Whittaker became a champion. Kelvin Gastelum became a #1 contender. Who else is there? Darren Till just recently went up there and did very well. No, actually, I can't say that. He did all right. But he's in a good position because he's ranked #4 in the middleweight division after barely getting by Kelvin Gastelum. So I don't see why Tyron Woodley can't do that. It's just it goes back to that. Does he have that spark still? Does he have that that fire inside of him? Maybe he did have that before this fight, but when he stepped back in there, it just wasn't the same for him. And when you got a killer, when you got a guy that's hungrier than you, like Gilbert Burns, it's hard, to come back on that type of fight. So if Woodley does get another fight, I don't see him fighting anybody in the top 15. If I was Woodley, I would take somebody that's like up and comer that is on the fringe of the top 15 and try to get a win, get back in the win column first, and then challenge somebody that's a bigger name, a bigger challenge.
Okay, I guess we better move on down this card, the main card. So the co-main event, Augusto Sakai defeated Blagoy Ivanov via split decision. Bring up the scorecards. Chris, why don't you kick us off? What did you think of this fight? Wasn't the most exciting, but a decent slugfest.
Yeah, I think the first 2 rounds were particularly good. I think in the 3rd round, they were both breathing heavy, very little movement. Augusto Sakai coming out of Bellator, 1 loss, I believe, to Czech Congo. It was split decision anyway. 29 years old, which is pretty young for a heavyweight nowadays. Ivanov, just an absolute gangster, been stabbed. Everyone knows the story. I enjoyed the fight. The scorecards, to me, were absolutely crazy. I don't know how one judge scored it every round to Ivanov. To me, that was totally wrong. And I had probably Sakai just ahead, but then it's how do you score it? Because, John, you can probably elaborate on this, but what did you think about the incident in the final round?
It's just Sakai was just faster, younger. But he's not much younger than Ivanov. We think Ivanov, we look at him and he's like probably 40 years old, but he's not. He's only 33. I was shocked when I heard that, when someone reminded me that how old he was. But yeah, it's just the scorecards, that one judge, like you said, he must be watching a fight where he's judging on how much damage you can take and how much you can move forward, and that's who wins the fight. And that's what Ivanov was doing in this fight. Sakai, he was more diverse in his attacks. I think when you're more diverse in your attacks, it scores more with more of the judges, the smarter judges, the judges that are really watching the fight. And that's how Sakai won. He was just more diverse in his attacks. He attacked the legs, and it helped out in the fight. He's only lost once, and he's on a 4-fight win streak in the heavyweight division. The only other fighter that's on a 4-fight win streak is Francis Ngannou. So it shows you where he's at. So Sakai should be getting a big jump in competition in his next fight out, and it might not work out for him. I could see him fighting maybe a top 10 guy. Why not? You know what I mean? He has everything that he needs to get in there and step in against one of those guys. So why don't you just put him in there?
Arlovsky, Olenek, Overeem.
Oh, why you want to do that to Arlovsky? Come on. Why you want to throw everybody to Arlovsky?
But the instant you mean, is this when Daniel Cormier was screaming about the fence?
Sakai grabbed the fence. Not only had his fingers in it, but he really did pull the fence. You could see the shape of the fence change. And I know they gave him a warning, but I think the amount of pressure he put on it and to stop the takedown, and if that takedown would have happened, you don't really know what damage would have been done on the floor. If you would have took away the point, it would have been 28-28 on 2 scorecards and a 30-26, which would have been just as ridiculous, even more ridiculous, actually. But yeah, on some level you do have to feel for Ivanov.
Yeah,
because
Cormier was losing his mind about
Yeah.
that. 'Cause especially with an arena with no fans, you could really hear him. And then the other commentators had to tell him to like quiet down. But it was kind of hilarious to see. And yeah, as Chris said, he was saying that should be a point off. So changes the whole fight, doesn't it?
yeah,
Well, that's
think
the problem right now in MMA, with referees. They're not really strict with the rules, and the guys could poke other guys in the eye. They sometimes they don't even get a warning. They just let the other guy get a timeout. It's like you either once you the warning is keep your fingers, from being extended out. That's a warning. And once you poke somebody in the eye, you gotta take a point from the fighters. It's like kicking somebody in the nuts. If you're like hitting that inside thigh over and over and over again, and then you hit them in the nuts, it's like you could probably give him a warning with that because you know that he's trying to target the inside thigh. But if it's like some guy just throwing wild kicks, then it's a different story. The fence grab, same thing. There's a lot of things that go on in these fights that sometimes we see and sometimes we don't. And I'm glad Daniel Cormier was yelling about that, because we need to be more vocal about these referees taking points away, because it can really change like where the fight goes. Like you said, that fight could have went to the ground and it could have changed everything. He could have got the finish and we didn't have to worry about the judges.
Well, I think one of the reasons why DC himself was so vocal compared to Michael Bisping is I think there's a lot of strikers who don't mind grabbing the fence, but I guess DC coming from a grappling background, it's like, no, I want to take you down. This is my area of expertise, and Sakai kind of took that away. If in every fight you fight a wrestler and you can hold on to the fence, you can have a bit of an advantage.
All right, well, I guess we'll move on again. Billy Quarantillo defeating Spike Carlisle via unanimous decision. Spike Carlisle came out of the gate hot. As John told me on text as we were talking during the fight, he's going to gas, and he did. And Billy got the win. I'll bring up the scorecards. Any arguments here for Spike? Probably not.
No, not at all. Fight of the night, though. I thought really entertaining, really good variety. Both of them trying all different sorts of techniques on the ground. Great standing game, guillotine attempts, triangle attempts, omoplatas. So yeah, I thought it was a really good. And it's really nice when you get to that third fight on the cards, and it's just a really good slugfest, and it shows everything that MMA can be, and then it really brings you into those two main events. So I thought it was really, really good, and I would love to see them fight again. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, Spike Carlisle, he is the alpha ginger, man. He can be promoted all day, every day. He's very explosive, and he exploded out of so many positions. Even though we felt or we thought that he was tired, all of a sudden he would explode out and be on top for some reason, you know what I mean? And I think Billy, he showed a lot in this fight too. He faced some adversity in that first round, and then he came back and basically dominated the second and third rounds. But he was tired too, because it looked like he took some damage in that first round. But I feel Billy, when he comes out in his next fight, he's going to be much better than he is than what we saw in this fight. Even though this was a fight of the night, I see Billy coming back even stronger. Spike, I don't really know what to tell. I can't really tell you what I know about him. I just know that he's explosive and he's a wild man. And if you notice in the first round, he had some questionable elbows, just like his first fight. Those angles, those the way that he was throwing down those elbows, I didn't really like it too much. And where it landed, it seemed like it landed on the back of the head of Billy. So, but no one picked that up. That's another thing. Back of the head shots. Like refs need to be very careful with that and make sure that doesn't direct the direction of the fight in the wrong direction. So, man, it was a fight of the night, and it was entertaining to watch. But really, all it does is get these guys paid, and it doesn't really move them up or down, I feel like, in the division.
Yeah, I think we just found maybe Spike maybe needs a change in management or something like this, so he can cool his head a little bit and be a bit more cerebral in the ring. I think we did find out, though, that Billy maybe has a much higher ceiling than I thought. That's the only thing I'd learned from this fight. I'd like to see him fight someone a little bit higher ranked.
What the hell happened there at the end of the first round? When Spike just started walking away, and then Billy got up, smacked him in the face from behind.
Yeah.
But he must have thought he heard the bell already. Or
Yeah, I think he'd had the clapper
Yeah.
that had just gone off, and he turned around and walked away. Something I can't think of any of the MMA I've watched anywhere around the world where I've seen that happen before. It might have happened. There's been so many fights, it's impossible to know. But yeah, it was slightly surreal.
It happened in Glory, maybe
Yeah.
last year or the year before, where the guy like kind of turned away and started walking away, and the other guy came, same punch too, like a hook, but in Glory, the guy got knocked out.
Yeah.
And this one, Spike was lucky that I think he saw on the screen out of the corner of his eye Billy coming up behind him, or it seemed like the referee said something to Spike Carlisle, which was weird if the referee said something, because you're not supposed to do that. But yeah, that was an odd exchange. But Billy was smart, Billy went and just started attack because he knew that there was still some seconds left. But I don't know what was going on in Spike's head. He was tired probably.
Yeah.
All right, Roosevelt Roberts defeated Brock Weaver via rear naked choke at 3:26 of round 2. Impressive from Roosevelt back in the win column there. Disappointed in Brock's performance?
I was disappointed in Brock's performance. He's a favorite fighter of mine. He's one of those fighters. He's never going to be a world champion, but I just love his style. I love the way he fights. I love everything about him. I love the aggression. I love that he looks like a crazy man. He looks like an absolute madman. So yeah, I think he didn't go in there with a very good game plan. I think he just wanted to knock him out, and I think Roosevelt just showed the better striker, better range, great jiu-jitsu. And with anyone who's done jiu-jitsu will tell you, when you have those long, skinny forearms, they're like having blades on your arms, because you get that up against someone's neck, you can do real damage real fast.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Roosevelt Roberts just showed that he's levels above Brock Weaver, and both of these guys came from the Contender Series.
Yeah.
But it just shows you that Roosevelt Robert came before Brock Weaver, and he has way more experience against high-level competition, and Brock Weaver is going to go in there and try to knock your head off. And Roosevelt Roberts didn't play that game. And what he did was he followed a great game plan of distance and picking his shots and showing more variety. Seems like that was kind of like the theme of this card, is the fighters that showed more diversity in their attacks, they're the ones who won. Unless, it was a quick finish. You know what I mean? And that's what Roosevelt Roberts did. He basically did what Gilbert Burns did, but he actually got the finish in the second round. Roberts did. Yeah, I was impressed by Roberts. I also like Brock Weaver. I've interviewed Brock Weaver a few times, and he's so funny, man. And his story is pretty insane, of like fighting when he was like a adolescent with fake IDs in a barn. So that's the background he has, and how could you not root for him? But yeah, this fight has showed a lot of his weaknesses, and yeah, and he didn't make weight either. So that's another thing.
That's the one thing is, all the beef between them. Brock Weaver's starting beef with Roosevelt Roberts over, I don't know over what, and it's like, you're the one who missed weight. I don't know, but some people.
All right, opening bout on the main card, Mackenzie Dern defeating Hannah Cifers via knee bar at 2:36 of round 1. Impressive from Mackenzie Dern, I thought, Chris.
Yeah, I actually thought this was a possible upset on the main card. Hannah Cifers is pretty good kickboxing, but I think when she came out, she just didn't have the right game plan to start with. She seemed to be not being afraid of being too close, being afraid of the shoot. She wasn't afraid of the shoots, which with someone as good on the ground as Mackenzie Dern, you do have to be. Mackenzie Dern gets a win after her last loss. I don't think there's too much you can really read into this.
John, any thoughts on this one?
Oh, yeah. Mackenzie Dern, one thing I noticed is that she was in much better shape. Like, if you looked at her body, it wasn't as round as it was before. You know what I mean? Like, she was carrying a little bit more weight. It looked like after her fights, or after weight cuts, going into the fights, but this time she looked a little bit more slimmer. She looked faster, and she's always going to have the power because she just gets that torque in her punches. But yeah, once you go to the ground, it's hard to compete with Mackenzie Dern. She's world class. She beat Gabby Garcia. Gabby Garcia is like straight monster weight in jiu-jitsu and kills everybody, and Mackenzie Dern beat her. So that's one thing about Mackenzie Dern that interests me the most, is because she's so good on the ground that it opens up her striking so much, that where she can throw bombs, and even though she gets clipped and goes to the ground, she can still get the submission on probably 95% of the fighters in the division. And that's what excites me about Mackenzie Dern. And Hannah Cifers had no idea how to get out of that knee bar, it seemed like. But if you look at the technical aspects of her snatching up that knee bar and how she positioned her legs and kind of figure forward her legs across Hannah's legs, it was a thing of beauty. And I loved it. I love knee bars. I love leg locks. Get them in. You know what I mean? We need to see more of those. Where's what's his name? I forgot his name. The featherweight, the one that ankle locked BJ Penn.
Ryan Hall.
Ryan Hall, exactly. You know, I'm all for those types of fighters. So I want to see Mackenzie Dern do that. I want to see her go in there, and if the striking doesn't work out, take it to the ground and strangle them, and take their leg home, take their arm home. I want to see I want to see more finishes. And I feel like right now she's the best physically. She's the best, and she could turn it up and go on a run in this division.
In MMA, there's probably no one with as good a jiu-jitsu pedigree as Mackenzie Dern, whose last name isn't Gracie. I mean, her dad is Megatron, so she's been rolling with her dad since day one. So, she's probably, she's been doing it since she could walk, I guess.
Well, an exciting start to the main card, definitely. The prelims main event. This one was worth talking about, I think. Katlyn Chookagian defeating Antonina Shevchenko via unanimous decision. I'll bring up the scorecard. Yeah, as you said, 1-1 v the Shevchenko sisters in the last two fights.
Well, you have to say, this woman, she has some balls or cojones or whatever you want to call it, because to fight one of the Shevchenko sisters and then to go in the ring with the other one is absolutely crazy to me. Fair play to her. You could even argue that this she probably just misses out, but she could have probably got a performance bonus for this, because I actually did not see this coming. I thought it was a great performance. And did anyone else hear that apparently Valentina Shevchenko was saying she wants to fight her in bare knuckle?
I didn't. I just saw Valentina tweeted after saying, sorry, I couldn't be there. I'm injured. Okay. I don't know what that is.
Yeah,
you see anything about that, John?
No. But with this fight, right? It did take some balls for her to go back to back against the Shevchenko sisters. But if you look at it realistically and look at their track record, Antonina is she's at the bottom of even though she's ranked, and it just shows you how shallow the flyweight division is. Even though she's ranked, is she ranked?
Let's have a look.
She's ranked as a bantamweight. No, sorry. She's ranked as a flyweight at number 12, right? So it does show you how shallow this division is, because I don't see Antonina as number 12 in the division. She hasn't put on those types of performances. And Moxan Ranaferi, it showed you exactly what you need to do against Shevchenko to beat her. So Chookagian, I was expecting Chookagian to go in there and finish her, because she has that ability of going to the ground and controlling the other fighters. And of course, she trains with like Sarge Eubanks and some of the girls that are very strong wrestlers. And what's her name? Claudia Gadelha too. Very good on the ground. And that's what I expected, and she did it. And I don't know what it does for her though. Really, it's just like, okay, you beat Antonina, and you lost to Valentina decisively. So you beat one sister decisively, and then you lost to the other sister decisively. So where does that put you? It just puts you in the same position you were before you got into this fight. So the next round, or the next fight that comes up, man, I expect her to be facing one of the top girls. I wouldn't mind seeing her fight like a Roxanne Modafferi. I think she's signed. I think she's locked in with somebody. But maybe even if Macy Barber comes back this year, put her against Macy Barber.
That would be fantastic.
All right. Elsewhere on the prelims, I guess we can talk about Brandon Royval defeating Tim Elliott via arm triangle choke at 3:18 of the second round. But I guess it was more about what Brandon said after the fight. John, you want to talk us through it?
Yeah, Brandon was talking about he had to go to work tomorrow night. He has to fly in and go back to work tomorrow night because basically what he's saying is he doesn't get paid enough as a professional athlete to survive, to be a full-time fighter. And that kind of trips me out a little bit because you see guys that are not even signed in the UFC and even girls, but they're full-time fighters, but they don't even fight in the UFC. So it's like, how did Brandon just squeak through like that and not be able to dedicate his whole life to all his time to training and becoming becoming a elite fighter? Yeah, it just shows you that John Jones, what he's saying is real.
Yeah,
it just shows you. It just shows you that he's arguing for every single fighter on that roster right now. He's fighting for them, and we could get into that for an hour or so, but yeah,
it does open a myriad of issues. We are talking about fighter pay. We're talking about revenue distribution. I mean, I think the NFL is just over 50%. It's about 18% in the UFC they give to their athletes. And also, I do agree that one of the big problems when I've spoken to fighters in other organizations or smaller organizations about going to the UFC is if you're highly ranked in an organization and you're making $50,000 to $100,000 a year, why are you going to give that up to go back down to 5-5 in the UFC and start all over again? Because you have to remember, people have kids to feed, families to feed. So it is a hard decision. No one wants to see no one in the world wants to take a zero off their paycheck. I couldn't live off that. I know most people can't. So you do have to look at it that way. And then what you do see in a lot of other organizations as well is if you're getting paid poorly, you will still be getting probably double the fighter pay in what you will get on sports sponsorships or t-shirt sponsorships, and you will get sponsorships, or they'll pay for your flights or help you out in other ways, or you'll have a car dealership in and you'll get your car for free, etc., etc. So that's going on to the Reebok deal. But yeah, as John said, I mean, fighter pay, issues with UFC pay, revenue distribution. I mean, we could probably do a 1-hour podcast every day this week and we still won't get to the bottom of it. And we might need an accountant and an economist and all sorts. So we'll leave that to the professionals.
Well, interesting. Yeah, we'll get to John Jones. I did want to talk a little bit about him after but yeah, I guess I'll just recap the rest of these prelims. We had Daniel Rodriguez defeating Gabriel Green by unanimous decision. Had Jamal Hill defeating Justin Abreu via TKO at 1:51 of the first round. You had Casey Kenny beat Louis Smolka via guillotine choke at 3:03 of round one. And Chris Gutierrez beating Vince Morales via TKO at 4:29 of round two. Any of those you want to pick out, guys? A couple of good finishes there.
I wanted to point out something that's very interesting that I don't know if everybody knows this, but on the first three fights of the night, Chris Gutierrez, Vince Morales, Casey Kenny, Louis Smolka, Brandon Royval, and Tim Elliott, they're all managed by the same people. Did you know that?
No.
They're all from the same management team.
Oh,
so
wow.
It just shows you like how important managers are to this game, where, we're in a time where fights are being put together on like 3 weeks notice, 2 weeks notice. And who are they going to call first? Managers. They're not going to go in the long route and try to find fighters. They're going to go to managers. And this is the time where it's like management is so important for a fighter to get picked up. And I just wanted to point that out. There were great performances by all the guys. Gutierrez, man, finished with leg kicks in the second round, not even the third round, second round. That's beautiful right there. That's something that you could show your kids when you're sitting in your rocking chair. Like, look what grandpa used to do. I used to chop down trees with my legs. You know what I mean? Like, it's a great win for him. Casey Kenny, we knew that he's very talented in that bantamweight division, and he just proved it with that first round. One arm guillotine choke. It was beautiful. And Luis Smolka is very good at getting out of submissions, and he couldn't get out of this. And it was beautiful to watch. Brendan Royval, we saw that. He actually went in and fought a ranked guy and defeated the ranked guy. So what does that mean about Brendan Royval? He's going to be ranked on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday. I hope so. They better not play around with him and leave him out the rankings, because Tim Elliott was ranked. Let me see. I think he's ranked like in the 11 to 15 range. So, oh yeah, he's ranked 11th. So give him the spot, man. Give him like 15, 14. He's got to be up there somewhere when it's over with.